So to capture amazing photos, you need to know the correct camera settings. Now, after photographing for nearly a decade and shooting professionally for years, then I personally believe that I've managed to nail down the exact settings that can help anyone achieve incredible results. Now, in this video, I'll show you both the pro settings that I've used to capture some of my best shots, as well as revealing a little known, less talked about, easier method that works wonders, without of course relying on full auto mode. Now, I think this method might surprise you, and I know that many might not agree with me, but it saved me a ton of time while still delivering amazing photos. Now, I'll be revealing that secret method a little bit later, but first, let's talk about some basic camera settings that are essential for any photographer. Now, if we're going to be completely honest with each other, which I think we should, then does it really matter what camera brand you're using? Now, personally, then I've been using Sony cameras for the last 8 years. However, what I'm about to show you will pretty much apply to whatever camera brand that you are using. I mean, maybe some things in the menu might differ and how you set things up, and buttons might look a little bit different, but at the end of the day, these are all cameras and they're pretty much designed to do, the same thing. Take photos or create videos. So my friend, just grab your camera, get comfortable and follow along, because we're gonna have a good time. Okay, so before we dive into the exact settings, then let me quickly just explain to you guys 3 key terms that will make everything else make total sense. ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. You can think of the ISO as your camera sensitivity to light. The higher it is, the brighter your image gets. But it also makes it noisier. It's kind of like when you're tuning up the audio on a bad speaker. Next, my friends, we have shutter speed, which is kind of like the blink of an eye. The faster it is, the more you freeze action, which is great when you're capturing, for example, a bird in flight, but it also lets in less light. If the shutter speed is slow, on the other hand, more light comes in, which is perfect when you're going for those motion blur effects, like light trails at night. Finally, there's aperture. You can imagine this as your camera's pupil. The wider it is, the more light comes in, and the blurrier the background gets, which gives you those beautiful, dreamy portrait-style shots. On the other end of the spectrum is, of course, the smaller aperture, which keeps everything in focus, like a landscape photo, but also lets in less light. Now, the key then to a great photo is balancing these 3 settings to get the right exposure. Now, this balancing act is often called the exposure triangle. It has nothing to do with Illuminati. It's just you have aperture, shutter speed, and priority. Aperture, shutter speed, and ISO in a triangle, which helps us, remember this, And my friend, if you get it right, your photos will come out perfectly lit, which is awesome. It's not only, lit, actually the light will be good, Now, this is all obviously explained really briefly and quickly. If you want to dive deeper into this, then I know a site which is absolutely insane. It lets you type in whatever you want, and it helps you find answers to anything in the world. It's called Google, and it's crazy. It's like magic, Alright, so next let's talk about RAW photos, which is arguably an important setting to put in if you want to maximize your camera's capabilities. Now, you can think about RAW photos as an unbaked cake of photography. Bear with me here, I don't know if this metaphor is gonna be good enough, but let's try, okay? So when you shoot in RAW, you're actually capturing all of the ingredients, light, color, and detail, without any of the processing your camera normally does when baking into a final image, for example, a JPEG. This basically means that you have way more control when it comes to editing, because none of them ingredients got thrown away in the oven. Let me know if that, metaphor made any sense. Now, photographers like me and you love shooting RAW because it's like having a full creative toolbox. By shooting RAW, you can, for example, adjust exposure, recover lost highlights, pull out detail from shadows that would simply not have been possible if you were shooting a JPEG. And because of this, shooting RAW is without a doubt the best option for those times when you want the absolute maximum control over your shots. Now, the way that you make your camera shoot in RAW might differ between brands, but on my Sony camera, I simply just press the menu button while I'm in the photo mode. Then down here, I press image quality settings, and here you can switch between JPEG and RAW. Notice, my friend, that you can also make it shoot in RAW plus JPEG at the same time, if that is something that you want, Now, I do need to be honest with you, though raw files give you absolute the most control when it comes to post-production, then I actually find myself using something a little bit faster from time to time. Especially those times where I need to shoot quickly, but still want high quality photos. Now, I'll tell you all about that a little bit later, but first, let's dive into when and why I shoot in manual mode, and maybe why you want to do it too, although it's not always my go-to. Alright, so let's then talk about manual mode and why so many photographers prefer it when they want to capture their ultimate photo. So basically, my friend, you can think about manual mode as the stick shift on your car, because it gives you full control over everything. ISO, shutter speed, and of course, aperture. Now, if you're young watching this and you have no idea what a stick shift on a car is, then don't you worry, we're here in my old van. Here is a stick shift. What this allows me to do is to change gears manually. And that is kind of what the manual mode is on a camera. With other words, then you are now in the driver's seat, which means that there's no more letting the camera make any decisions for you. Basically, you get to fine-tune every little detail to create the exact shot that you want. Now that means that photographers prefer manual mode when they want absolute full control, if that, wasn't clear enough. And because me and you, we really like metaphors, then let's think about manual mode as crafting your own brewed excellent coffee versus just grabbing whatever is brewed when you're changing your tires and that workers coffee, that black stuff. It's good. It's not the craft good though. But when and in what situations do then photographers prefer to go full manual versus something different? Well, in my experience and when I'm out shooting, I think full manual is perfect for those situations where, for instance, the light is constantly changing, like a sunset shot, or when you like to freeze an action completely, for instance, like a sports photography. In my opinion, it's also great for capturing long exposure shots, like those moving lakes or waterfalls that you see landscape photographers do. And I basically use it anytime that I want to get super specific about a shot, and I do not want to leave anything to chance. All right, so how do you then get into the manual mode on your camera? This is really hard, so come closer, because this is taking me years to figure out. You see the button on top here? You turn it to M. And now, my friend, you're in full control. I know. That was pretty hard. And maybe after years of practice, you can also manage to go into manual. But one thing to understand, and it's good to know, is that there is really no thing as one setting fits all and work perfectly for every photo. It will so much depend on what you're shooting, where you're shooting, what time of the day you're shooting, and the subject that you're going for. However, there are some good things to keep in mind to make a perfect shot and how you can utilize everything that we talked about. A good rule of thumb is something that I keep in mind at all times is that I try to keep my ISO as low as possible because that affects the quality of the photo a ton. Then, based on the look that I'm going for and how I want to expose my images, I set the aperture and the shutter speed. For example, if I want a shallow depth of field, a lot of bokeh, then I need to shoot in low aperture, which lets in a ton of light into the camera. Now to balance that, then I need to either lower my ISO or raise my shutter speed. That being said, then although manual mode gives me the ultimate control when it comes to photography, then it's not really my go-to setting when I'm out shooting. Sometimes I just prefer something simpler, quicker, that still allows me to get the perfect exposure that I'm going for, and something that anybody can really use and still get fantastic results. I'll tell you more about that a little bit later.
First, I want to give a big thanks to the sponsors of today's video, Motion Array, for helping make this video possible.
Who are you?
I'm your virtual assistant, Josh.
Okay. Cool. So Motion Array is an all-in-one platform for creators like us, where you can find things such as stock footage, templates, music and sound effects, plugins, and a ton of cool graphics like these film burn effects that you see me use all the time, and a lot more. And I just added this brand new AI voiceover feature, which lets anybody create high-quality voiceover with just some simple text. It's incredibly easy to use. It's what you heard me, the assistant up there, was made with this. Let me show you how you use it. First, you just click the voiceover feature up here, and then you pick the voice that you want. want, there are a ton to choose from. Next, you simply just type in your text into this box, and if you want to, you can fine-tune it. There are a few options that you can slide with over here. I also think it's worth to note that you can even change the language, and then once you are happy, you just press generate, and voila, your voiceover is ready. So my friends, creating cool content that stands out couldn't really be simpler. In the description, there's a link which gives you $50 off your yearly Motionary subscription, which is kind of like your one-stop shop for content creation. Alright, so let me show you guys how I'm able to be the ginger version of Bruce Lee, but being unbelievably fast to switch between the settings that I actually use and need. I do this with something called memory recall. This is a feature on Sony cameras, and I'm pretty sure it's on other camera brands as well. If it's not, then my friend, it's time to switch. Basically, this allows me to set up my camera to my preferred settings and save them so I can quickly jump between those whenever I want. And that's what these numbers are for here, the 1, 2, and 3. I can basically just save whatever setting that I want, preferably what I'm using the most, and by just switching, I go to that. Now, this is incredibly simple to set up. Once you've dialed in the settings that you want to use, you simply go to Menu, Shooting, Shooting Mode, Camera Set, Memory, and here you can choose if you want to go on number 1, number 2, or number 3. Now, you can customize this by yourself, or you can simply just copy me if you want to. On number 3, I have JPEGs, because I don't always have to shoot in RAW. For instance, just my family or memory, I don't have to have these massive RAW files. JPEGs there is good enough. Number 3, I have RAW, manual mode. All right, and then number 1, my friend, I also have RAW, but here I have a different mode that I personally find myself using a lot more. I will dive into that now. By the way, I'm currently creating a community for us photographers. This is a space where we can learn from each other, get inspired, and most importantly, just connect and have fun with each other. If that sounds interesting to you, my friend, then join the waiting list. You can find the link in the description down below. And if you're watching this from the future and the community is already like up and running and thriving, then in the description there's also a link where you can like get more information about it. Alright, so it's time to reveal that secret, lesser talked about method that I mentioned earlier. Now, this is not really a secret, but whenever I mention this or talk about it, I feel that many people go like,
why do you choose to primarily shoot in this mode, Mr. Icelandic guy?
But the truth is, I just like it. And I'll tell you my reasoning in a second, but first, let's dive into what it is. And I'm of course talking about aperture priority. Now, you can think of this mode as the perfect balance between control and speed. Basically, you get to adjust how much of your shot is in focus by adjusting the aperture, but the genius thing is that the camera takes care of the shutter speed for you, basically making sure that everything is properly exposed. Now, in my opinion, and I know that not everybody agrees with me here, but this is like the best of both worlds, because you are in control of the creative part, but the camera, it handles that, technical stuff. And this method I use when I want to shoot fast without sacrificing quality, or mostly when I'm in a run and gun environment, with this almost all the time, especially when I'm out taking street shots. There, everything is happening so fast that I need to get the shot in the moment, else it's gone. So what I do, I can just focus on the aperture that I want to have and the ISO, and the camera takes care of the shutter speed. Now, if you want higher shutter speed, then I just crank up the ISO a little bit, as much as I know my camera. I know how high I can take the ISO without the camera, the shots being too grainy. So that's how I deal with how fast I want the shutter speed to be. But as I said, this is in a run and gun environment where I need the shot more than it being the perfect settings that I'm going for. You understand? Because shots go by like this. Before you know it, the moment is gone. But also, I use it a lot for my type of landscape photography because it's mostly handheld. And if I'm on a tripod, full manual is the way to go, because then I have a scene in my head and I want to control everything. But for example, when I'm out shooting landscape and I want to a beautifully blurred background with sharp foreground, I basically just set the aperture and the camera does the rest. So yeah, this is my go-to trick when I need to be quick, efficient, and still get a pro level results. Now, a little pro tip here is that I personally always like to underexpose my photos in camera to protect the highlights, because in post-production it's much easier to retrieve the shadows than blown out highlights. So with aperture priority, I just set the exposure to minus 0.3 to minus 1, somewhere there. I usually know how far I can push this based on the camera that I'm using. So that's another reason why it's important to get to know your camera. It should be like an extension of your arm. I'm really poetic now, So now that you got your camera settings all dialed in and ready to go, then what about lenses? Now in my opinion, you don't really need a bag full of glass to get pro level like photos and videos. I mean, just a few key lenses can do the trick. In fact, there are only 5 that I use for all of my professional work, and I'll be breaking them down all in my next video. Trust me, if you want to level up your gear, then you definitely want to check it out. So click here to find out the 5 lenses that you really need to take a shot to the next level.